Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altspeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call. 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I'm your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. I want to start the program out tonight by talking about an industry practice that has been causing some problems lately, and I dealt with it today a little bit, and so I thought I'd make a mention of it on the air. Anybody that's worked in networking for more than 5 minutes has probably had to terminate a patch cable at some point. In fact, back when I was in high school, I was going through what my high school considered to be their networking class, and not a disproportionate amount of that class was sitting around learning how to make patch cables. Well, anybody who's tried to do it knows that the first few times that you try and do it, it almost seems impossible to get all little 8 wires to get in the right order and then be short enough to fit inside of the RJ45 connector so that the crimp block can tighten down right on the jacket and hold all of those wires in there. But after enough times and with a little bit of technique, you can perfect it. Recently, in the IT sphere, there is a new type of RJ45 connector that's going around, and I've seen these for sale at a lot of electrical supply places as well as Amazon. They're actually fairly well reviewed on Amazon, and what they are is what's known as a pull-through connector, and so it takes the individual little wires and pulls them through the RJ45 connector, so they actually come out the front side of the RJ45 connector. And then you take whatever tool you want and you snip off the ends, and the promises or the idea or the goal here is that you have an easier way to get all those little wires lined up. You don't have to worry about getting them to the right length, because whatever is just sticking out the front, you'll just cut off and then move on. A couple of problems, though, that we've noticed over the years. First one is that on certain Cisco devices, they won't seat properly into the in the switch port, and so that's caused some intermittent issues. Well, today I came across a new problem that I'd not seen before. It was in a camera installation, and the client called and said, "Hey, our cameras are not working." Now, we didn't originally do this camera installation, so I went out to take a look at it, and the installers who had done it were using those pull-through wire connectors. And what had happened was, it's almost impossible to get those wires to shear off completely. And so what happened was, 2 of the wires were sticking out a little bit. They made contact with each other, shorted because of the PoE out. The whole end just turned black and burnt, and so pulled it off and chopped the end out. Luckily, not the camera wasn't damaged, the PoE switch wasn't damaged, none of that. It was all fine. But just if you see those connectors, or if you hear somebody telling you about the next greatest way to crimp RJ45 connectors, you heard it here first. Stay away. It's bad. It's a trap. They're no good. Learn how to do it the right way. Again, 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. That is the way to join the program. Make your voice heard. We'll take your questions on Linux, on business. I want to get to a piece of feedback. We usually don't open the show with feedback, but Joseph H. wrote in with a bit of a correction to something I said on the air, so I wanted to address that right off the bat. He says, "Hey, Noah, first of all, I thoroughly enjoy listening to your show and have enjoyed the real-life insight that you provide all the way back to the JB days. I wanted to quickly point out something you were talking about in the most recent show, and it will apply to Xfinity customers. You were telling a write-in guest about setting their provider-supplied modem into bridge mode to use their own routing equipment. While this is best practice, short of providing your own equipment and save the rental fee on the modem, it will actually hurt a section of your listeners who are Xfinity cable subscribers. Let me explain. Anyone who has an Xfinity and uses the company's supplied gateway with their gigabit tier of service will notice something odd when setting up in bridge mode. Their bandwidth will instantly be capped to 500 megabits. I've done multiple tests, and this single change drastically impacts service. I'm not sure why they did this other than just being another questionable business practice to keep people tied to the rental equipment. However, there is a workaround. If you use your own router and can still access your account page, you can set up port forwards. Yes, I know this would normally be done via logging into the modem router, but not with Xfinity. Click on the Connect tab, click on the See Networks. Under Advanced, you will find Port Forwarding. There you can forward all of your ports, port 1 to 65535, on your own router's IP address. Then connect all of your devices to your router, and then you can set up real port forwards to individual devices. The Xfinity provided gateway will effectively be in bridge mode and will allow for full use of gigabit service without being capped at 500 meg. I know this is a lot to go through, and I think a much better option would be to use a modem that you could provide in conjunction with the router that you also own. However, in the meantime, this is a way to make things work. Thanks for all you do for the Linux community, the Linux Trucker. Hey, thanks, Linux Trucker. I really appreciate you writing in and sharing this with us. And you're right. I was not aware of that, and so I really appreciate it. I did make a call to a couple of, we don't have Xfinity here in this area, but I did make a couple calls to colleague of mine that does work a lot with Xfinity, and he confirmed everything you're saying. So we will write that up, and we'll have that in the show notes of steps to do that. You'll find those at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Probably also get them on Linux, the Linux Delta wiki, which is at wiki.linuxdelta.com. Jacob joins from Grand Forks. Hey, Jacob, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, good to talk to you again.
Hey, same.
Say, I have a question. I've been trying to call you or call your radio show over my mobile phone, and it keeps, blocking me. I was wondering if you had any insight to that.
I don't. You know, we had a couple of issues last week and the week, but last week we had issues with our streaming. The week before that, we had issues with our phone. So I'm not sure if there was just some general crud going around that has now since resolved. Our streaming guys got over here and fixed that, and I had them look at the phone system and they couldn't find anything. So I think it's back up, but certainly if you have problems, please do let me know, and we'll continue to look into it.
Okay. Now for my main question. I'm looking for an online form builder, self-hosted one, if you knew of one.
Okay. Well, let's start with this. So the first thing is I'll start with the easy go-to if you just need to get something done. It's not self-hosted, but we'll start there, and that is. Sorry.
What's that?
Okay, so sorry, I thought she said something. So we'll start with the form builders that we typically recommend to people, and that's Woofoo, WUFOO. And what I like about Woofoo is, first of all, it's free, so there's that. They offer a tremendous amount of flexibility, and you can get a good long way with their free plan. Then when you want to start doing more advanced stuff like dumping to a database and stuff like that, they do have pricing plans. But this is the contact form that we've used on our websites and what you use when you fill out a contact form on asknoahshow.com, and so I've been very happy with it. Now I've looked at a couple of self-hosted forms. There are none of them that have really blown me out of the water. The closest one, the one that I liked the most, was Typeform, Teleform. I'm sorry, and Teleform is an open source self-hosted form thing that you can run on your website. The thing that kind of kept me away from it was it seemed like there was a lot of overhead. And actually, just pulling up the GitHub page on Teleform, now I see that they do have a deprecation warning that they're not making a lot of updates for it. So maybe even that's outdated information. I haven't been real impressed, Jacob, with what I found for self-hosted forms. A couple other ones to look at, Orbian and Form.io. Both of those are ones that we have looked at for our website. We've rejected them for one reason or another. But if you're looking for something self-hosted, something that you can run yourself, that's where I would start. Is there any particular, is it more of just a security, data privacy thing is why you want to self-host?
Yeah, pretty much. And I've used some other online form builders, but they don't give you a lot of control over the data. And so if you want to automate some tasks, you get very basic automation functionality, but I'm looking for a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. What and I should be clear, I'm not a web guy, but the web guys that work for me, and they're pretty smart, have consistently told me that the way to go about this is to get into an infrastructure and then use that infrastructure to deal with the forms. So, for example, either Nikolai, which is a static building platform, or something like WordPress, both of those have the infrastructure for putting forms and building them in, so you don't have some third-party thing hanging off the side. It seems like if you go the route of some sort of all-encompassing platform like Nikolai, or there's another one out, Hugo. If you go with Nikolai, Hugo, or WordPress, all of that functionality is there, and it seems to work very well. It seems like there isn't a big market for just a single standalone, self-hosted. I want to build this web form and I want it to store information here. At least there is. I haven't seen it. I'm sure now that I've said that, 15 people will write in and tell us, and you'll find out next week.
Yeah. I was looking at WordPress, but I just didn't like the idea of, downloading or using a bunch of third-party plugins. That didn't sit well with me. But
yeah, I'm with you on that, Jacob. I appreciate the call. I'm with you from the standpoint that that third-party plugins leave a lot to be desired from a data privacy standpoint. Unfortunately, I don't know that I just don't know that there's a lot of other great alternatives. But does that give you at least something to go off of?
Yeah, I got a starting point, and I can probably go from there and let Google do the rest of the work.
Okay, sounds good, Jacob. I appreciate your call. 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Robert calls from Texas. Hey, Robert, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Excellent. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Just want to thank you for introducing me to Home Assistant, starting off with. But as I've gotten this installed, I'm trying to find the best devices to kind of work an out-of-the-box turnkey experience. So I'm mainly trying to find the best bulbs. And then also, I know my light switches, they don't have grounds going to them right now. So I know that plays a factor in that as well. So do you have any recommendations or any open standard protocols that I can make sure to look out for whenever I'm shopping on Amazon or eBay or wherever?
For sure. So the go-to run-of-the-mill light bulb that works with Home Assistant, that if you go to the forums or jump on the chat, is going to get recommended, is Yeelight. Yeelight. They're $30. They're available on Amazon. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, and this is kind of how I have picked out this stuff, I will go down into the questions and answers section on Amazon, and I'll type in privacy, and I'll just look at what it says. And I'll read you the one that comes up for the Yeelight and so on, and then you'll understand why it's not in my house. But it says, even after the setup, the app wants to know your location. It doesn't need this information to function. It works fine if you refuse to provide the location information. It also wants you to pick from a region that happens to correspond to a list of locations of AWS cloud servers where they're probably hosting. There's no reason a light bulb needs to connect to the internet if I'm not using Alexa or Google Home. Who knows what other information it's collecting and sending back to the company. Now, these are things, is it a step-by-step case to be made that Yeelight is ripping people off and stealing people's data? Probably not, but it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and so I've been a little hesitant. But here's what I found: essentially, you have the big players up top. You have Philips Hue, those kinds of big names that everybody recognizes. They're a little bit more money, and they're almost certainly tied to some sort of cloud experience because that's the way that most people want to use them. Then you get this kind of brand, which is where the Yeelights and I'm trying to think of the other one that's around. But there's a couple of popular brands that TP-Link comes to mind that make light switches and light bulbs, and they're in that $30 to $40 range, and they're just lower end, but they're standard enough that they work with all of the stuff. And then there's the bottom tier, and that is very inexpensively made, almost hard to find, very strange-looking brands, Chinese-made things that work with Home Assistant that you'll find out on forums and so on and so forth. The problem I've had with all three of these is none of them really cater to privacy. And so I can you find one that works out of the box with Home Assistant? Yeelight will do that. Do I have any reason to suspect that they're doing anything particularly malicious? No. In fact, take the app off your phone once you have the thing set up. It shouldn't matter because you shouldn't need at least you and I wouldn't be controlling them from the app. We'd be controlling them from Home Assistant. So it's probably fine. But I will tell you, just in full disclosure, what I've done in my house is I've used Lutron light switches. And the reason that I've used Lutron light switches is because they communicate back with the Lutron controller over their own RF interface. They don't go over the network. And so I don't have 40-some devices that need to be updated on the network and firmware and all of that. The only presence on my network from a light standpoint is the Lutron controller. And that has a single MAC address and a single network cable, and it's on a single switch port, so it's fairly easy to keep that thing in check. And then above and beyond that, I've not noticed anything crazy or out of the ordinary happening with it, and so that's kind of lended me to trust Lutron. The other end of the spectrum, though, again, full disclosure, I purchased a Honeywell RedLink system, and I had a sort of an opposite experience with that. The Honeywell RedLink system all talks to the central base controller just fine, but that base thing wants to call home. It wants to call back to HoneyLink to register with their little cloud thing. And so currently that's disconnected until I can make a determination as to how I want to go about fixing that. But I'm very uncomfortable with stuff on my network that's communicating, Robert, with stuff I didn't consent to. And so for that reason, I have stayed away from a lot of these devices, but they're certainly out there, and I'll have a link for you in the show notes. To address your ground issue, I've not really noticed a lot of problems with light switches requiring ground. It's usually easy enough to find something to ground to. The bigger issue that I've had or that we've run into is, and I'm not an electrician, is that there's no neutral wire in some older homes. And so in the cases
That's what I meant to say, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and so what we've done there is if you get a decent electrician involved, they don't I thought they were going to have to run all new wire to the light switches and the outlets. And of course, like I said, I'm not an electrician, so that's why I didn't know that that's not necessary. And they have a way of doing it, of getting a neutral wire into that box without running all the way back to the panel. And exactly how they did that, I couldn't tell you. But that's what we've done is we've contacted a electrician to have them do that. I will tell you this though, the Lutron Radio Raw 2 system, the accessories, or excuse me, the appliance switches, the ones that just turn on and off, those require a neutral wire. However, the dimmer packs that you would use for most of your lights do not require a neutral wire to be present in the box. And so if you have a hot wire, if you have your hot wire and your load wire, as long as those two are in the box, you can use the Lutron Radio Raw 2 dimmers. And it stands to reason then that their Mastero series, which is kind of the series that they're aiming towards home automation enthusiasts, that likely, because it's the same style dimmer, doesn't require a neutral as well. So if you're looking for light switches, I would head over to Lowe's or Home Depot and take a look at Lutron. If you're looking for expensive, well-recognized brands that will work out of the box, but almost certainly are communicating back with some sort of central hub, you can look at something like Philips Hue. And if you're looking for just the run-of-the-mill, I just want to get started with Home Assistant, I just want to be able to turn some lights on and off, I would look at the Yeelight. One of the places I did use some of these lights was, like, for example, here at the studio I have them, and then also in my kid's bedroom I have, it's not Yeelight, it's the other kind, Wemo. Another company, same kind of story though, right? I couldn't find anything that overtly calls them out on violating people's privacy. At the same time, there's a couple of questionable things that people are asking in the reviews. So it's on my list of things to replace when something better comes out. But the thing I liked about the Wemo switches are once they're set up, you do need the app to pair them to your access point. But once they're on your wireless network, you can get rid of the app. You don't need it for anything. And you can do all the rest of the configuration from Home Assistant and just control them that way, which is what I'm doing. And then, of course, I have the Home Assistant app. So does that kind of give you some direction to go down?
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you very much. I should go ahead and throw in that I did have another assistant, and I currently have three Philips Hue Bluetooth lights that do not require the hub.
Okay.
And from what I understood, I couldn't find anything online on on how to set that up. So I didn't know if those were compatible or not. So, but yes, sir, you did answer my question. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think, and again, I'm not the guy to ask about Philips Hue lights, but I believe that what you can do is pair those to the hub and then allow the hub to talk to Home Assistant, I think is how the Hue lights work, but I could be mistaken on that. I don't own any Philips Hue lights.
Yeah, these that I have right now don't require the hub, so I don't even have a Hue hub. And
it's not it's not something maybe you can add on.
Well, that's something I can definitely look into, of course. So, okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet. I'll have a link for those Hue lights in the show notes, so you can check those out and see if that's something that's interesting to you. Again, they're very well reviewed on the community side, and I will give them credit for this. If you go to community.home-assistant.io and just hang out there on their forums, a lot of times when something comes out that is, I guess, concerning from a privacy perspective, there's usually somebody that pipes up and says, hey, just so you know, this is the thing that happens. Since we're talking about Home Assistant, before we move on, I'll just throw this out there because there's people out there far smarter than I. If anybody comes into a out-of-the-box solution for controlling RGB LED lights, I'd be very interested. I am aware of the little, I can't think of the exact part number, but there's a little like circuit that you can buy off from China for like $8 that allows you to do it. And I have a couple of those and I've played with them. But again, it feels like a bad science project. It feels like I'm building stuff, a science project, and then trying to use that for home automation. I would like a ready-made deployable thing. So if anybody knows that I can attach a strip of RGB LEDs with bare ends on it and just use screw terminals, tighten them down, and then have a little controller that talks to Home Assistant and then controls the LEDs. We've been looking for one of those. I can't find it. So if anybody knows or has another recommendation for Robert, let us know. 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Kenny calls. Hey, Kenny, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah. How are you doing today?
Excellent. How are you?
Fantastic. So my dad runs an HVAC business, and I'm looking to back up data that's on his office computer to a free NAS box I have set up here at home. And what I'm looking for is, something, it'll back up his data that'll be encrypted client-side, but I'll have some kind of a dashboard of some sort to verify that the backup is running so I can check and see, yes, the backup is running and his data is backed up. And I found that some things like Duplicati or Backup PC that have a backup server dashboard. I'm sorry, not Duplicati. Backup.
Okay.
That have that dashboard that you can look at, but those I can't find anywhere where I can encrypt the files client side with that. I'm wondering if you had a solution.
That's an interesting question. Is the client side running Windows or Linux?
It's Windows.
Man. Well. Let's see. So my go-to solution for Windows for when we're backing Windows up to a free NAS box is a company called VEAM, and they have a free Windows backup thing, but I don't know for sure if it supports encryption. We've never tried to do that, at least not from Windows. And I just looked at their site. It does offer end-to-end encryption if you go with so they have a free version. It's the community edition, and that gets you 10 license for free. If you go with their backup and replication version, it includes end-to-end encryption, but it doesn't specify how that works. So I'm not sure if they they may be selling you a backup service for that, right? I'm not sure exactly what their website is indicating here just on a 5-minute quick look. But VEAM is where I might start. The other way that you could go about doing that is if you could use something like, well, what I should ask is, what kind of files are they?
Mostly Word documents and a QuickBooks backup file.
Okay. So I was going to say you could look at something like a Veracrypt vault and store the data in a Veracrypt vault, and then have the Veracrypt vault sync back over to FreeNAS. Let me ask you something: Is the FreeNAS box on site?
No, it is not. No, that's here at my house.
Okay, I'm sorry, you told me that. So here's in absence of me going out and Googling, which I'm sure you could do yourself, in absence of me Googling, here's how I would set that up if you were a client and you came to me at Altispeed Technologies and said, this is what we want to do. I would create a site-to-site VPN tunnel between your dad's work and your home, or at least the section of your network at your home that has the FreeNAS, and that will accomplish getting an encrypted tunnel from his business to FreeNAS. Now we don't have to worry so much about encrypting the data before we send it. The VPN will take care of that for us. From there, what I would do is I would use whatever agent you want to use, to include the Windows backup agent if you want to, and have Windows or use VM to sync all of those files over that VPN tunnel back to the FreeNAS box and store it on a data set. And then to handle encryption at rest, I would use the encryption functionality of FreeNAS to encrypt that data set. And then the data would be encrypted at rest. The data would be encrypted at transit. The only problem that presents, or the only thing I don't like about that solution, is it means that the data is unencrypted as it sits at your dad's office. So if somebody breaks into the office and gets a hold of the computers, the data is not protected there. But I suppose the other way of looking at that is the data isn't protected now. I'm sure he just has QuickBooks running on the computer, yeah?
Right, yeah.
Okay, then yeah, my guess is that that's where I would start. As far as some sort of utility that you could install on a Windows client and will encrypt the backup and then send it over to FreeNAS and deposit it there, I don't know of anything off the top of my head. And the way that they would go about doing that probably means you'll be reliant on the client software then to decrypt the data, unless it complies to some sort of industry standard. And so I guess where I get to with that is I would start by if I can use existing open technology that isn't going to prevent me from getting to the data, because at the end of the day, your dad calls you 6 months down the road and says, hey, you know what? Thanks for doing that for me. Now I want to expand my office, or I want to have my own backup server in my house. It's trivial then to just add a different site-to-site VPN, set up his FreeNAS, map that share, and send it back over. Or swap FreeNAS out with Open Media Vault, or swap the client-side software because you don't like the way that it's syncing, or it makes the computer run. Or we had an issue with a client where a certain sync software was conflicting with their PDF editing thing, and so it wouldn't work with Nuance, and so we had to wipe the sync client and get a different one. It enables you to make some of those changes without having all your eggs in one basket.
Okay, yeah.
So does that give you something to start? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing there is, how do you go about yourself in whatever backup situation you're setting up in making sure that the backups are running and verifying that they're still working? Because if
sure.
Your backups stop running for some odd reason, they're kind of worthless.
Absolutely. So the first rule of backups is, once you think you have a backup solution in place, you should do a test. Make sure that the backup is in place and working. But what I do is for the most critical servers that run, Altispeed, that run, things like our ticket system, things like our scheduling system, those kinds of things. The way that those work is that there are scripts that put all of the data into one tar.gz file, and then there are rsync scripts that copy them over to a dedicated backup machine and then send me an email and letting me know if something went, and this is the important part, went wrong. I have a report that's generated every single day that I look up. The first thing I do when I get into my office And that report basically is what would be emailed to me if I had it email me when the backup was successful. The problem with doing that is it creates a very high noise floor, and then I would start ignoring emails. So that report's there. I don't pore over it, but I skim it and I take a look, and each thing, it tells me the date that the time and date that the backup completed, so I know that it happened today, and it tells me the size, the delta size, so it tells me what was different from the previous time, and I use some common sense to kind of just go, oh yeah, that about makes sense, what I would expect to see coming from that particular server at this particular time. And if we have a large job where there was a ton of documentation and a bunch of images and stuff, yeah, I do take an extra look and see and say, okay, yeah, good. 5 gigs of data came across. That's good. That's about what we want to see. And so those are the most critical things. If somebody pays us for 24/7 server management with backups, then there is a scheduled time once every 30 days where a technician logs into their system, make sure that everything is up to date. There's a document that they fill out and say, we checked this thing, we checked antivirus definitions, we checked firewall logs, we checked this, and part of that is backups were complete and had completed this many backups in the past month with this much data, and it's stored here. And we check on that, but that's something extra that somebody pays us to do.
Okay, right.
So on the day-to-day, I mostly trust that the backup's going to work, and then I have a small verification process to kind of keep my eye on it in case anything is amiss. And if something does go amiss, then I get an email alert. If for example, a backup doesn't complete or has an error, then it emails me and says, hey, something's wrong, and actually it does a couple steps more than that, because it'll actually get a ticket opened up, so in case I'm not here, somebody else can take a look at it as well.
Okay, and what kind of software is sending those emails?
So we are right now it's Zabbix. However, we are in the process of evaluating some alternative management software, and I asked me again in 2 weeks, and the answer may be different. But right now we're using Zabbix.
Okay, awesome. That helps a ton.
Great. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Make your voice heard, become of the program. Hey, I'm glad to have the first half hour filled with calls. I hope we were able to help some of you. Our pick this week is Open and Shut. This is an open source project hosted on GitHub, and it allows you to send Morse code by repeatedly slamming your laptop shut. Yeah, you heard that right. It's a battle-tested encoding trusted by pilots, submariners, and amateur radio operators. Morse code has been around for years. It's certainly something that I picked up when I got into amateur radio. One of the things that I like about it is you can send it with just about anything. You can send it with a flashlight in the middle of a boat if you want to. So it's a very robust language. You can hit well in excess of 100 words per minute. So it only makes sense that we would have a way to enter this with our laptops by slamming the lid shut. It's kind of a fun program. It's available on GitHub. We'll have a link in the show notes. You'll also have an opportunity to take a look at a GIF where they demonstrate them slamming this ThinkPad open and shut to make various different letters. So now the tagline is, you used to close your laptop lid and it would go to sleep. Now it writes the letter E. Also in our gadget pick of the week, a bootable compact flash CF2 2.5-inch SATA adapter. Now, this is something that we have been using for the past few years to bring legacy technology into 2020. Very often, we will come across a client who has a piece of hardware and they tell us, well, this computer I just can't live without because I need the SATA drive. I need to have this particular software, and the hard drive can't be any bigger than this. And back in 2001 when it was made, these are the size hard drives that it was expecting. Or we need an IDE drive, and those are getting harder and harder to come by. Well, cheap Chinese manufacturers, and there's no particular brand of these that I like, they're just a good thing to have around, make small little compact flash adapters that will connect to either a SATA connector or an old school IDE connector, and it turns a compact flash card into a little hard drive. Now, Telos Axia has been using this inside of their mix engine for a while, and so I tore a mix engine apart and found that this $4,000 or $5,000 audio machine is running off of basically a little compact flash card. Additionally, the FreeNAS, I believe it's the FreeNAS Mini, runs off of a small little compact flash card. And so this is a very good way if you don't have a drive that is going to get beat to heck with read and writes. You get a little bit more speed. You get the speed essentially of an SSD, and in a very small form factor, also with smaller sizes available, because again, a lot of old hardware doesn't know what to do with a 2 terabyte drive. And so this is something, you can find them on Amazon. I'll have the one that I ordered most recently from Amazon, but I've ordered them from Newegg. I've ordered them from Alibaba. You can get them just about anywhere. But it's one of the coolest little things that $13 little devices that you can have around. It also makes managing backup and restoration of some of these appliances much, much easier, right? Because instead of having to reinstall the operating system, reinstall all the software, redo all of the configuration, you essentially set it up one time, you DD the card to an image file, so DDIF and then the dev SDB, and then output it to backup.img or original flash image.img, whatever. And then you store that image file, and if you ever need to restore that machine or anything ever happens to that machine, just DD the image back to a new compact flash card, stick it back in the machine, you're back up and running. So really fantastic. And I dealt with this just a few weeks ago. We needed a computer, and the caveat was we couldn't have a hard drive bigger than 64 gigabytes because that was the largest that particular machine and the software and all that stuff would work with. And so we had to find a drive for 64 gigabytes. I said, I know just the thing. We went and got a compact flash card. Worked great. By the way, when you're buying compact flash cards, highly recommend Lexar or SanDisk. And I recommend Lexar over SanDisk. Had a couple of SanDisk drives get kind of toasty and then burn themselves out. So that wasn't really exciting. But Lexar has a very good track record, both in the professional video and the professional audio industry, of making very, very high quality cards. And so if you get a Lexar professional card, chances are you're gonna be sitting pretty well. Hey, face masks are all the rage lately. Face masks are worn to reduce the spread of COVID-19, but we're finding out that they decrease the accuracy of commercial facial recognition. How much? By up to 50%, according to an investigation of America's technical standards watchdog, NIST. Quote, using unmasked images, the most accurate algorithms fail to authenticate a person about 0.3% of the time. Masked images raised even these top algorithms' failure rate to about 5%, while many otherwise competent algorithms failed between 20 and 50% of the time. The accuracy also varies wildly depending on the algorithm. The best performing algorithm was from DeepGlint, a computer vision and AI startup out of China. It was able to correctly identify faces obscured by light blue face masks with a high coverage just over 96% of the time. Many had error rates between 20 and 50%. So there are a couple of abnormalities too, while algorithms had error rates of near or up to 100%. So what I take away from this, first of all, I think it's remarkably comical that the most accurate facial recognition in the world, even with face masks, is in China. Man, the jokes I could make with that. Man, the privacy implications of that. Man, the terrifying nature of that. But the other part of that is, out of all of this COVID stuff and all of this pandemic stuff, I have tried to find a couple of really good gold nuggets, things that we can look at and say, well, here's a positive way to look at this. On the positive side, I've met a lot of people at my house, known as my family, who apparently have been living there for a long time, and I have been working and out at places and traveling and all over the place, and have not really had the amount of time that I would like to have to connect with them. And so COVID has forced me to be at home more often, forced me to not be out and about, and I've really learned to embrace the time that I have with family. Second thing is, the amount of innovation that has occurred in the United States and around the world is absolutely fantastic. The fact that we have 3D printed not only face masks and face shields, but also 3D printed accessories for making wearing masks more comfortable, and 3D printed parts for ventilators and other hospital-related things that can't be made by traditional supply chains. This is coming together out of not only the open source community, but the makerspace have all come together and said, hey, here's a problem. We're smart. We have these things. We have these tools. Let's go make things. And so I would say is a very positive thing that has come out of the epidemic. We've really realized the true power of community and and what we can accomplish and build as a community. And this kind of rides on the tail feathers of that, from the standpoint of now we have this debate going on if people are going to wear face masks, or if they're not going to wear face masks, or if they're going to be forced to wear face masks, or if they're not going to be forced to wear face masks. And there's very good arguments on both sides, and there's people that are looking at this from all angles, but nobody up until just now has really talked about the privacy implications that come along with wearing face masks, which, by the way, seem to be in our favor. If you're concerned about the fact that every time you turn around, there are more security cameras and there are more systems available to identify and track people, to include even large department stores, putting cameras in their store and tracking shopping habits. I saw Amazon has recently launched one of their newest inventions, which is a store that's completely cashier-less. They have cashiers, but it's only for if you refuse to do it the way that they want you to do it. And the way that they want you to do it is they want you to take a cart, they want you to go around the store, pick up what you want, put it into your cart, and then walk out the front door. Cameras will track you and your face so they know who you are and where you've been. They understand your purchasing habits. They know what you've picked up. They know what your default payment method is. And so you don't have to, they don't have to worry about shoplifting. You don't have to worry about checking out. You don't have to worry about scanning everything. It's all taken care of. This is a new way that Amazon is trying out retail. And mark my words, this is one of the things that is going to take off. Because when you are running a store, your largest cost is employees. And so when you all of a sudden can start to eliminate that labor force and replace it with technology and automate that technology, the vast majority of us are very comfortable shopping on Amazon.com. The vast majority of us are very comfortable at shopping on an online store, or shopping on a big box store and having it delivered to the store and just go picking it up. So you take that one step further to the point that I can just go into the store, have the things that aren't readily available at the store delivered to the store and just pick those up. And then the things that are very common and are for sale by a lot of people, well, you'll just walk around the aisles and pick those things up. I don't have to deal with another human being. I don't have to touch any sort of POS system, scanning system, whatever. Simultaneously, I've reduced my employee costs. I have increased the likelihood that somebody can get out of a store without touching a shared surface, thereby at least somewhat reducing my exposure risk to infectious disease. And I have increased the convenience on the customer. If there's some sort of product that maybe is slightly embarrassing, or maybe you just don't want people to know that you're buying that thing, now the only person that knows is the computer and, of course, all of the people that go through the data back at Amazon. So this is a new way of a world functioning. And in a new way of a world functioning, there are people asking questions like, well, what does this do for privacy? And it turns out this might be the first time we're actually going to go backwards from the privacy standpoint, where now I have a little bit more privacy than I had before. It's perfectly socially acceptable now to obscure the one thing that is tied to me that I don't get a say in, right? I get a say if you ask me for my driver's license and I refuse to give it to you. I get a say if I don't use a debit card and just use cash. I get a say if I don't sign in or put my email address in or sign up for an account. I don't get a say in my face. And when you capture that face and you take that information and you analyze that information and start collecting my habits without my consent and without my knowledge, that's a problem for me. But what I'm happy to see, at least in this case, is that we're going the other direction. Unless China has their way, in which case they have proven that they can make a facial recognition system that works even through face masks, or around face masks, I guess, as it is. 855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. 2-Bit in the chat room adds that N95 masks are the ones to watch out for because they reduce your oxygen intake. Again, arguments on both sides. It's kind of outside the scope of this program. Hey, there's a massive vulnerability that came out. This vulnerability allows for unauthenticated attackers or authenticated users with network access to the configuration utility of basically, from what I can tell, because this is outside the scope of the kind of things that we install at Altispeed, but it's essentially a load balancer. It's called the Big IP, and it's a network security appliance that essentially does load balancing. Well, there was a massive vulnerability that allowed attackers to execute arbitrary system commands, create or delete files, disable services, and execute arbitrary Java code. This vulnerability may result in complete system compromise. The big IP system in appliance mode is also vulnerable. This issue is not exposed on the data plane, only on the control plane. So attackers are using this to infiltrate some very large organizations and even some government organizations, because apparently this device is very widely used. Additionally, there is a second exploit found in a network product sold by Cisco tracked as CVE 2020-3452. And this flaw resides in the company's adaptive security appliance and their firepower threat defense system. It allows unauthenticated users to remotely view sensitive files that, among other things, can disclose web VPN credentials, bookmarks, web cookies, partial web content, HTTP URLs. Cisco has both Cisco and the F5, the manufacturer of the big IP, have issued fixes for this weeks ago. But if you haven't applied them, you need to do so immediately. In fact, this is one of the writer of the article jokes that this is one of those things that you better stay up late tonight until it's done, because this is a massive security flaw. And we bring it up on the show for a couple of reasons. First of all, because if there is anybody out there that has these appliances in production, of course, we want to make sure that you're aware that there is a massive security vulnerability and you should patch it. The other thing, though, that I would add to this is the kind of stuff that gets fleshed out when all of the code is out in the open, rather than when it's some big proprietary blob that sits up in the middle of nowhere and only a handful of companies use these things because they're so terribly expensive, right? The reality is that a lot of security flaws and a lot of security problems are solved or at least found simply by a large majority of people banging on things in a different way. But when you have appliances that are just thousands and thousands of dollars and the company is so far removed from the community, it's impossible for the community to get involved and try to offer some insight. And this is probably why you can have something like Nextcloud, who, despite having a bug bounty, if you can find a security vulnerability, they'll give you thousands of dollars, but nobody can find it. Because they've had enough people knock on the code and say, here's a bug, let's fix that. Here's a problem, let's fix that. Here's a problem, let's fix that. When it comes to F5, they have no such resource, and so they're kind of on their own. And so if you have an F5 big IP system appliance in use, be aware that management port can execute arbitrary code, and that management interface is compromised, and you'll want to patch it. MS Defender ATP comes to Linux. Quote, to meet our customers where they are and relieve customer challenges in managing multiple security solutions to protect their unique range of platforms and products, we have been working to extend the richness of Microsoft Defender ATP to non-Windows platforms. And today we are excited to announce the general availability of Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection for Linux. Adding Linux into the existing selection of natively supported platforms by Microsoft Defender ATP marks an important moment for all of our customers. It makes Microsoft Defender Security Center a truly unified surface for monitoring and managing security of the full spectrum of desktop server platforms that are common across enterprise environments, that is Windows, Windows Server, Mac OS, and Linux. So first, in the past, when Microsoft comes out with something like, for example, Teams for Linux, I say, well, I guess that's kind of cool. This is the first time I'm actually kind of excited over what Microsoft is doing. And I'm excited because I've not really seen any large-scale threat management protection for Linux that's really targeted towards the average user. Certainly when you get into specialized industries, there is very high-level software that is designed to be used for managing large clusters and stuff like that. But when you get down to just, hey, Bob has a server in his office and would like to make sure that it doesn't get compromised, is there anything to put on there? Right now, the Windows folks have that available to them, right? And to a lesser extent, Mac OS folks have that available to them. And occasionally you'll see, an open source antivirus that gets touted. But for the most part, there is no widely accepted industry solution. And Microsoft Defender ATP is the first example that I can think of in where you have a very large multi-billion-dollar company that is constantly putting effort into security, not because they necessarily care about Linux per se, but because they care about the security model of Azure and the security model in general of providing a value to their customers. And what their customers have told them, what you and I have told Microsoft is Linux is part of our infrastructure. Linux is going to be running on our servers. And so if you want to create solutions that work for us, you're going to have to make that work on Linux. And so when our system administrators need to be looped into discussions, they're going to have teams for their laptops. And when we manage servers, we don't want to run one piece of software on our Linux servers and one piece of software on our Windows servers. So we're going to need a central managed solution. We need one thing that we can install on everything, and that is Microsoft Defender ATP, or at least it can be. Is it open source? No. Does it require a software license? Yes. It requires the Microsoft Defender ATP for Servers license, and I'm sure it's a pretty penny. But at the end of the day, this is an actual tool that we didn't have prior to Microsoft making it, and now we have it after Microsoft made it. When Microsoft released Teams, we already had Slack, we already had Rocket Chat, we already had Mattermost, we already had Matrix, we already had Telegram, we had plenty of messaging platforms. We already had Discord. This when they go to add something, it's particularly when it's just some Electron wrapped app that they just took the web version and said, okay, here's a deb, good luck, or a snap package, good luck. That doesn't really imply any investment, I guess, from Microsoft. But when Microsoft comes out and says, well, we're going to make this threat protection model for Linux, and I'm speculating here to a certain extent, I don't believe it's just well, we made this for the other three platforms, we may as well just publish this thing to Linux as one additional thing. I think Microsoft is looking at this and they're saying, you know what? Linux is a massive part of people's infrastructure these days. Linux is a massive part of keeping people secure. And if we want to be the company that's going to be their one-stop shop to buy all of their software from, then we have to make software for Linux. And so that's what they're going to do. So good job, Microsoft. I really appreciate you coming out and producing a piece of software that I have not seen a really good, clear competitor to at the moment. Certainly not one with the brand recognition of Microsoft. And so if anybody uses it, I can't say that I am going to rush out and purchase server licenses for Microsoft Defender ATP and install it on all of my Linux boxes, but I'll certainly probably at least give it a whirl so I can see what it's all about. 855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624, the email live at AskNoahShow.com as we wind down the program. We talked last week about a new version of Element. That is the replacement client for Matrix. It replaces Riot, specifically Riot X, which was their bleeding edge development version. I have been playing with Element throughout the last week, and I have to say this is a definite improvement. Again, right off the bat, the ability to change between organized by activity and organized by alphabetized lists is, if I had nothing more than that, it makes the client more usable, because when you start getting into a number of chats, it becomes very difficult to find a particular chat or a particular person that you were talking with. Now, if you know their name or you know their screen name, of course, you can use the search functionality. But if you don't, and trying to keep on top of who sent you the last message could be a little confusing. In the previous version of Riot and Riot X, when you would favorite something, it would simply go to the top of the list. And so the first thing that you favorited was on the bottom. The last thing you favorited was on the top. With the new version of Element now, they allow you to organize by alphabetized or by latest activity. And so that's been really nice. I've also had an opportunity to play with the SMS bridge. Again, something I mentioned last week, but I hadn't really dug into it. I just kind of set it up and tested to see that it works. So now I have a little bit more experience with it. SMS Matrix, is an app that's free on F-Droid. You can install it. And what you do is you open the SMS app on your phone, SMS Matrix on your phone, and you give it a username, a password of a authentic user on your Matrix home server. So, for example, you could use like bot SMS man or something, and create a username and password. Enter that into the app. Then you tell the app what your username is, and so you just put that username in, and that's it. Save the settings, and then you're done. When your phone gets a text message, the SMS Matrix app takes that text message and invites you to a chat in Matrix. And so you get a notification that your bot that you've set up is asking to invite you to a chat. You click accept, and it changes the topic of the conversation to the phone number of the person who texted you, and then it goes through your contacts and renames the chat to the person that texted you. And so when you look at a text from a person that has texted you, the way that it presents in Riot is bot has created and configured the room, bot has invited you, bot changed the topic to the phone number, and then you can talk to that person as if they were a Matrix user. And this, in 7 days, has, and this is no exaggeration, has transformed my life. I was on severe weather watch for the radio station, and our staff meteorologist wanted to be able to come in and talk with me about, hey, here's what's going on with the weather, because he obviously understands meteorology. I don't. He wanted to have all of these conversations over text. I'm sure he might have been able to do it a different way, but that was kind of the way he sought to reach out to me. I didn't have my phone anywhere near me. In fact, I'd forgotten it that day. It was sitting back in my house on my bedside stand. But because I had Riot, because I had Element, I was able to open it up, and I was able to carry on this conversation. What I found after I got done with this massive, long conversation, I'd completely forgotten he wasn't on Matrix. By the way, if you're interested in joining our Matrix server, we have it at linuxdelta.com, matrix.linuxdelta.com. We'll have a how-to up walking you through how to get connected. We'll see you next week.